Today we'll discuss where GTA 5 story would go if Trevor died in the Hood Safari mission. So first, let's clear up how it would happen. After the shootout in Grove Street starts, Lamar and Franklin would be preoccupied with, well, staying alive, and they wouldn't notice that Trevor was surrounded, and so Trevor would be gunned down in the middle of the street with Franklin and Lamar just barely making it out of there alive. This means that the Merryweather heist would likely never happen, and also that the FIB would now just send Michael and Franklin on those crazy missions, meaning that the mission Blitz play would likely be a lot more difficult even from a gameplay perspective compared to the original, and that Franklin and Michael would have to start doing the work for Devin Weston on their own, which also means that Michael would likely be in the mission Eye in the Sky stealing the Z-Type with Franklin instead of Trevor. This wouldn't however affect Michael's business with the movie studio and Solomon Richards, however it would affect his business with Martin Madrazo, and Franklin would have to do that job for Martin with Michael, meaning that things there would go a lot more smoothly. So Patricia wouldn't get kidnapped, Michael wouldn't have to go on the run, but things would go south when Davey and Dickwad would go to Michael's house asking him and Franklin to finance the whole shit show. That would of course be the mission Monkey Business, meaning that they wouldn't be able to get out of doing the Polito score, and I imagine that this would be a similar situation to Blitzplay, with it being a lot more difficult. But I also do think that Michael and Franklin would get an additional gunman for the job, probably even two, to be honest. Two missions that just wouldn't happen or are derailed, as well as Predator, as there wouldn't be any need to smooth things over with Madrazo by robbing that train, or not even to take out the O'Neill brothers, which were Trevor's problem to begin with. The mission Hank 10 would also never happen, meaning that Floyd and Deborah would both stay alive, and Wade would likely get kicked out of their apartment and go back to Sandy Shores. Now on to the big one. The big one is off the table, at least for the time being, as the crew thinks they couldn't do it without Trevor, but we'll come back to this one later. Real quick though, if you're enjoying this video right now, please leave a like on it, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also check out my second channel, that's where I do some Kingdom Hearts content as well, so make sure to check that out if you're interested. Now let's get back to the video. To backtrack a bit, how would all of this affect the dynamic between the crew? Well, I think that Trevor's death wouldn't really affect the relationship within the crew. I don't think that, let's say, Michael would particularly blame Franklin for Trevor's death, and I also think that there wouldn't be a reason for Franklin to hide the truth from Michael. And with that said, I do think that Michael would, from the outside at least, seem to be kind of relieved that Trevor's dead, and he'd likely try to convince himself of that too. But I do think that in reality, after being reunited, he would still somewhat miss him, because despite everything, they have been through a lot of shit together, both before Los Santos and in Los Santos. But let's not avoid the elephant in the room. Let's go to the biggest change in this reality, and that's that Michael would never have his main conflict with Trevor, and Trevor would never find out the truth about Brad. This also means that Michael would never be kidnapped by the Chinese, and instead he would, with Franklin and Lamar, be delivering the cars to Polito Bay. And once Michael would experience firsthand getting scammed by Devin Weston, the book of the big one with Lamar on board instead of Trevor would be open. However, not before the new trio would do the FIB raid together as a test for Lamar to prove himself. But how would the wrap-up mission go? So in the original, while it's not known exactly how Trevor found out where to find and cover Michael, I do think that it's safe to assume that maybe Lester contacted him and asked him to watch the place. Sticking with that logic, I do think that Lester in this reality would also send Lamar or Franklin, or probably both of them, to back Michael up from afar. After this, things would yet again be put in motion for the big one, and this is where missions like surveying the score and planning the big score would go down compared to the original. However, Michael would still have trouble with Devin Weston, so the whole subplot with Meltdown and Devin going after Michael's family remains completely unchanged. What also remains unchanged is the Lamar down mission, aside from the fact that Trevor's not there of course, and Michael and Franklin would have to go save Lamar on their own, probably meaning that Michael would have to go into more head-on combat compared to the original where he was just a sniper in the woods. The big one is the next thing up, and I mean, come on, do I even have to say that it would go pretty smooth? At this point, Lamar has integrated himself into the crew, and he figured out how they work and how they do shit, meaning that the big one would, despite Trevor not being there, be carried out without any problems. However, there are some changes that would be made to the final mission. So Michael would still go for Stretch, Lamar would, instead of Trevor, go for Steve Haynes. While yes, Steve didn't really order Franklin to kill anyone, he was still a problem for the crew in this reality, as he could have them arrested or blackmail them even further if he wants them to do more dirty work. There's a million other options that Steve could use against the crew, so therefore he he had to be taken care of even in this reality. This leaves Devin Weston, who Franklin would be sent to take care of, and also the Chinese not only wouldn't be taken out in this reality, but they'd also be probably the biggest winners aside from our main crew, of course, as they would be able to expand into Blaine County with Trevor dead, although I do think that problems would eventually arise between them and what's left of the O'Neill brothers. I guess this what if scenario goes to show that Trevor is in fact pretty important to the story, as without him we wouldn't really have that main conflict between him and Michael, while also affecting some of the story subplots such as the stuff with Martin Madrazo, and even the problem of Steve Haynes is a little bit different in this reality compared to the original. But on the flip side, we also see Lamar having more of an involvement in the story, with him sort of filling in that void left behind when Trevor died. And with that said, I want to thank you for watching this what if. Leave your what if suggestions down in the comments. Make sure that they're actually something that would affect the story in a significant way. And until the next video or stream, bye bye.